There's two things that are happening together. You know, on the one hand you have the Northern Territory intervention where they've put government managers in charge of the places and they've got rid of the community development employment programs as they were operating. On the other side, the local Aboriginal councils have been abolished and replaced by these large shire councils which encompass huge areas. You know, there's 6 major ones, you know, for the whole of the mainland Northern Territory. You know, I mean there's more than that, but there's 6 big major ones, you know, that encompass these huge areas, right? And the level of service that people are getting is just not there. You know, there used to be a council that was run by local people, employed local people, was determined what happened by local people. It no longer exists. You know, you're having to deal with a bureaucrat sitting in Alice Springs to get your garbage collected, for example, and it just doesn't happen is the reality. You know, so it's just, yeah, there's just been the stripping out of the very meagre resources that were provided, you know, in the bush are now gone. And it's an explicit policy actually to say that we're only going to provide increased levels of resourcing to a very small number of communities. You know, there's 75 prescribed areas across the Northern Territory, right? There's only 20 of those that are going to be considered what they call hub towns. And we might build up the service delivery capacity of the hub town. We're going to build a few new houses in the hub town only if the people in the hub town sign a 40-year lease, so they give their land over to the government for a whole 40 years, then we might build that up, but all the other places are going to be left to rot and those people are going to have to move. And they're quite explicit about that in the policy, you know, so it's another wave of dispossession, you know, of saying to Aboriginal people, get off your land, you know, and we're going to herd you into these government-controlled settlements, just like they did with the missions, with the welfare settlements. It's the full-blown apparatus of assimilation that operated previously is back and operating again, and it's, you know, causing enormous problems.
Paddy, what sort of response are you getting from people in communities when you go in to do your work?
Well, people are very eager to talk, you know, and people are very eager to, you know, to share, you know, what really is sharing their pain, you know, like the way that the incredible racism that's been experienced, the incredible hardship that's been experienced. People want to get that out, you know, and people want to get that heard. And increasingly, people want to get organised, you know, people want to actually do something to stand up and fight back. So, I mean, some of the, you know, the best, you know, sort of stories that have come out about the intervention have come out not because someone went and wrote about it, but the people out in Blackout, they picked up and walked off. They said, we're not having this anymore. There's sewage in our streets. No one's collecting our rubbish. There's no work. See you later. We're going and we're going to set up our protest camp and say enough's enough, and we're going to take the power back. And it's sort of through that a lot of stories broke through, you know, into the mainstream press and into mainstream consciousness that were previously hidden. You know, but for Blooder Watch, there's plenty more places that are suffering and going through the same thing, and people are starting to look at that now and say we've got to get organised and stand up. I mean, there's separate but related issues that Aboriginal people living in the town areas themselves are experiencing as well. You know, a lot more people are coming into the town areas now, so the overcrowding is getting a lot worse. You know, there's no employment in town. Actually, in the Aboriginal town camps, there's 90% unemployment. Right, and for the Aboriginal population in Central Australia more broadly, there's 70% unemployment. Now in the mainstream society here, unemployment is 4%. Right, so you have incredible levels of disadvantage and unemployment, you know, no housing and very large numbers of people coming in. You know, we're just up in Tennant Creek, and there, you know, they've gone from having more than 400 CDP positions, now they've only got 130, and half of those people are working for the basic card. You know, now combine that with, you know, hundreds more people in and around town because there's nothing in their remote area. They've had to come into Tennant Creek, and you really have this, you know, a pressure cooker situation where the you know, the social problems, you know, just get worse and worse. So, you know, on the other side as well, they're not interested in actually funding and resourcing local Aboriginal controlled organisations in towns. They're dismantling those. So they've taken over the town camps. It's now the Northern Territory Housing that runs the town camps rather than the local Aboriginal Council. The Northern Territory Housing doesn't care about Aboriginal people. You know, they're going to leave these places, you know. And they say they're doing upgrade programs and there is some work that's going on, you know, but they've admitted themselves that they're not even going to raise these houses to the standard of mainstream public housing, and yet they're going to charge people more rent and give them no say. You know, so the local Aboriginal organisations like the Tunganjira Council, you know, people that provided strong advocacy have come under severe attack and been silenced and are being broken up. So, you know, it's happening on the two sides. On the one side, it's much harder to live in the bush, and people are having to move in. But in town, it's becoming a much more hostile environment as well, because they're not willing to actually give Aboriginal people any say or control over their own circumstances.
Paddy, the light's going, the crickets are coming, and it's taking over. But just very quickly, thanks for talking with us today. But is there anything else that you'd like to say at this stage?
The one thing I would like to say is that I think that you know, one of the most promising things that has happened over the last, you know, few months has been the increased awareness and involvement of the trade union movement in Australia, actually, in the struggle that's happening here. But it's got to be some of the most exploitative employment conditions in this country are happening because of the intervention. You know, people working, you know, in municipal service jobs, and they're getting paid with a ration card. You know, and it was back, you know, with the Wave Hill, you know, the Gringy people there, you know, all the Aboriginal stock workers right throughout here used to be paid in rations for the work that they were doing, and, you know, had big strikes and walk-offs, you know, to fight for equal wages and also to fight for their land rights. And you're starting to see now with the Umblada Watch walk-off, with the moves by a lot of Aboriginal people around here to actually start looking at joining up with the unions. You know, we can fight again, you know, for the equality of pay opportunities, employment opportunities, you know, with, you know, the land rights that are due to Aboriginal people. We're starting to see, you know, that sort of movement and that sort of orientation develop, and I think that, you know, it's incumbent on all people in Australia to actually say that this struggle is their struggle. You know, it needs to be taken up. You know, these extreme levels of marginalisation and racism, you know, if this is allowed to fester, you know, everyone in this country goes backwards. And, you know, hopefully with the union movement coming on, that sort of unity to fight for change can push forward and make some breakthroughs.